You know, when the Proverbs were first given, they were given orally. Solomon, according to 1 Kings chapter 4, wrote 3,000 Proverbs. We don't have them all in the Bible. The Lord selected from all the Proverbs that he wrote. And by the way, you know, Proverbs are not the thing you just sit down and write quickly. Proverbs come from observing how life works and pondering that, and then thinking of a nice, creative way to put those thoughts together to make them picturesque, to make them easier to remember. And so God has used him and the wisdom that he gave him to leave us a big corpus of inspired proverbs for us to learn by. I think that originally, part of the reason why Solomon created this was under his leadership of the country, of the people of God in the Old Testament days, it grew way beyond what it had been even for his father David. Through these alliances and marriages that he had and so forth, his territory extended quite a bit. So God was increasing that kingdom at that time, so there was a great need to develop people who could administer and rule in a godly way, who could carry out this wisdom and implant that into the society. So I believe that initially these were used to train the royal court, all of the princes, for carrying on different ministries, okay, of education and health and engineering and all kinds of things that a government needs. He had building projects going on during that time. You see the personal note in many ways when Solomon says, my son, my son, my son, and gives that personal exhortation. But I think also then as they were written down and put together in a form that we're making use of, it became part of the scriptures to teach not just the royal court, but to give to the nation. And now God has put them in one of the 66 books for the entire world. Anybody can read these Proverbs and benefit from them. They are for everybody. And I hope that you are taking them to heart and benefiting from applying what you're learning. Now tonight, we're going to look at another very practical topic, and that is to evaluate what our work ethic is. I mean, that's how practical Proverbs is. Because Solomon knew that having a good work ethic in his country was important for them to be able to establish and stabilize a growing economy, a growing government, to keep things on track. And so you see that there are some 18 verses between chapter 10 and chapter 25 that are dealing with contrasting work ethics. On the one hand, or the one extreme, there are the lazy people, or the sluggard, or the slothful. There are different names that are given to them in this book. And on the other end, the diligent, those who are hardworking. So that's what these two pictures are trying to help us to see. Now, I think I know where you want to be. You want to be part of the diligent, but I think what Proverbs does is cast these pictures, snapshots of different things in life for us to look at and evaluate ourselves. Which side of those extremes are we, and what is our character saying? Now, I know that many people have said work is part of the curse, that work is part of the fall of man. Without Genesis 3, we wouldn't have to work. Well, I hate to bust the bubble, but that's just not true. So I want to take a quick look at some verses in Genesis just to get a picture of what God says about the role of work in his creation. In Genesis chapter 1, verses 28 through 30, God has said he blessed them, told them to be fruitful and multiply. He gave man a couple of important commands: to subdue it and rule over it, okay? Now, subdue is kind of like a military term that means kind of conquer, but there was no evil or nobody to conquer it from. So I think the idea is just jump on this, take control of this wonderful creation and study it to see how it works and make it work, okay? Because God wants to see this creation really to flourish and provide for mankind. And the ideal to rule was to utilize that knowledge that you get from studying that creation to make it work for the animals and for human beings. Also in chapter 2, we get a couple of more words with the same kind of idea: cultivate and maintain or keep what's there. And the idea there is that, I think, to cultivate, I mean, again, it was a lush place, but still there was no rain, so it was his job to make sure that the plants, the herbs and so forth, especially what was edible, was getting the water that it needed through channels and from the rivers and so forth. irrigation, if you will, and to maintain it, to see that it continues to grow and to flourish. Okay, so work was a part of God's creation from the very beginning. It was part of his perfect creation. It was put in place, and God was giving man meaningful things to do with that wonderful creation. Now, the fall did affect work. Here we see in Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 15, talk about how Adam and Eve both disobeyed, and God began to announce the consequences to them for that. And when we get to chapter 3, verse 17, and God is talking to Adam, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, you have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying you shall not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Now that curse means that the earth itself was affected by Adam's disobedience. God cursed the earth. It would no longer be as productive naturally. And he's added different things to it. It says here in verse 18, it talks about thorns and thistles now will be growing for you. So no longer will just the herbs and the fruit-giving plants be what naturally grows, but there's going to be something else fighting for that water, fighting for the minerals and nourishment from the soil, and that is thorns and thistles. They're going to be sucking up the nutrients that the good plants need. So you're going to have to work. You're going to have to do some weeding for the first time and take out these plants that will otherwise steal what the edible things need. And in verse 19, it talks again about work, but it says that work has now become more difficult. It says, by the sweat of your brow shall you toil at the ground. And that word toil, sometimes it just means do the job that you have to do, but sometimes it means painful, hard work, and that's the word that's used here. You're going to have to do hard work to make the ground produce like it did naturally before you disobeyed me. So it was a constant reminder. And it says you shall do that until you return to the ground. So this was something that wasn't just, you're grounded for the weekend, Adam. But this is a life consequence, not just for you, but in succeeding generations. Your whole life, you're going to be working to try to make that ground produce what you need and what your family needs. Now, Solomon wrote just a little bit about this in his philosophical book, the book of Ecclesiastes. And that's where he shares with us all of the experiments that he did in life to try to find out what is the meaning of this and that and how does everything work. One of the conclusions that he came to was the fact that work is still a good thing. Here is what I have seen to be good and fitting, to be able to eat, to drink, and enjoy oneself and all one's labor. For this is his reward. This is the gift from God. So God has still made work something that we can get satisfaction from and to be able to enjoy the fruit of our labor by being able to provide and enjoy eating and drinking. Okay? So work is still a part of God's creative order. Now, not everybody believes that. There are a lot of people that think, no, work is just part of the curse, and so I'm going to stay away from it as far as I can. Okay, and this is the guy that we're introduced to, the sluggard. Now, if you want a more modern term, I think in 1979, I think I read that the first time this word was used in English, at least in print, couch potato. Have you ever heard of that word? Couch potato. Okay, that's a person who just likes to lay at the couch. He doesn't want to get up, so he's going to watch TV or listen to his music, or now he can scroll on his phone and interact with social media and so forth. Just sit, eating mostly junk food or drinking. So he just likes to take life this way, okay? Doesn't really want to get up. So the word that's used in Proverbs is lazy, or asel. That's the Hebrew word. It means to be sluggish, okay? Slack, idle, not active. And this is used 14 different times in Proverbs. And listen, it's only used in Proverbs. This is a unique word that Solomon is using to show what a guy who doesn't really want to work is like. Now, another word that's used 4 times, and that is slothful. It means to be negligent, loose. Only does things kind of half-heartedly. That's his motion. And here are the 4 places that word is found in the book of Proverbs. So, what Solomon likes to do is paint pictures with his words, and so he has an extended passage. So let's look at this. I'll read it from Proverbs chapter 24, starting with verse 30. I passed by the field of the sluggard and by the vineyard of a man lacking sense, or a man lacking in heart. And behold, it was completely overgrown with thistles. Oops, there's that word. That's a result of the fall. Thorns and thistles. Now they've overtaken this man's vineyard. And behold, it was completely overgrown with thistles, and its surface was covered with nettles or thorns. And its stone wall was broken down. When I saw it, I reflected upon it, and I looked and I received some instruction. So here we have that kind of another proverb. Every picture tells a story. Okay, that's what Solomon's saying. Look at this picture that I painted for you and try to draw something from it for your life. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, then your poverty will come as a robber and your want like an armed person. So the idea here is that it's almost like those last two verses. It's like he's quoting from the sluggard. That's his excuse. Why is it like that? Well, just a little more sleep, a little more slumber, and a little folding of the hands. I just need a little bit longer. I'll get up, I'll get at it, but let me get another nap or two in. And the hands are not working, so they're folded, They're just relaxed. But he's saying poverty is going to come. Destruction is going to come quick, as if you were a vagabond. Now you lost everything and now you're homeless. You're out on the streets trying to get what you need to live, or like somebody had just robbed you and now you have nothing. It's going to happen that suddenly to you because you weren't paying attention as life was going by. So what are some of the quick lessons that we can see from this passage here? He's frustrated because look at his vineyard. It's probably been in the family for decades, but now it's nothing. It's going to take a lot of work now just to get that vineyard going again. Digging up the soil, pruning of the old branches, cutting back, planting new, and trying to make sure it has the water that it needs. Now he's got to rebuild the wall to protect it from thieves and so forth. So he is frustrated, and he's brought on more hardships because he didn't keep it up. It was easier to keep up than it will be now to rebuild it, make it functional again. And that'll take several years before he has enough for his own use and to be able to sell and make money to buy other supplies that he needs. So he's losing what he has. He may even lose the field itself because he may not be able to support himself in the meantime. And he's poor and he's hungry. He doesn't have enough for his own needs. So he's suffering and he's headed towards destruction, is what the end of verse 34 talks about. But is it just him? In that kind of agricultural society, one person didn't just own a field for himself. Who else is affected by his inaction? His family, his community. They're not going to have crops for the community. The whole country is dependent upon each one doing their part. And so he is letting down not just himself, but his family, his community, and even the country. This is not going to be what Solomon needs to build that country and to stabilize it as it was growing so fast. And so that's why he highlights the terrible situation. So what he wants the sluggard to see in a kind of a shocking way, to throw it right out there at him, is while you're trying to get a few more winks of sleep, you're going to lose it all. You need to realize that the price tag on laziness is much higher than you think, and you're not the only one that's going to have to pay it. So that kind of inactivity or the loss of that field didn't happen overnight, did it? Somebody just doesn't decide to be lazy today and lose his field in the same year. It takes a while. This is a habit. So what Solomon is trying to do is help all of us to take a look at our life and say, how are we doing? What are our characteristics like? Because as Ralph Waldo Emerson said, you sow an action, you're going to reap a habit. You sow a habit, you're going to reap character. You sow a character, and you're going to reap a destiny. So the sluggard has reaped his destiny in those verses, but it came a little bit at a time. So be careful. How do you feel about the alarm clock? Is it okay as long as there's a snooze button to keep pushing? He's saying, no, let that alarm clock get you up. Open your eyes. Another proverb says, Wake up and go fulfill your responsibilities. Or do you like just lounging around and eating and drinking, thinking only of yourself and what you want to do? Look at the room. It's quite a mess, and it probably stays like that. In fact, chaos follows somebody like that wherever they are. And it even affects your studies. So these are habits that once you let them get rooted in your life, they're going to affect you for the rest of your life. If you don't study well, then you're not going to get maybe into a college or university. You're not going to get in the study program that's going to help you to prepare for the future. And if you do the same kind of thing there, habits are hard to break. Anybody can raise their hand to that one? Habits are hard to break, especially bad habits. So once they get ingrained in us, they're hard to break. So Solomon said, wait, check it out. Beware. Look at yourself. Are you beginning to develop some habits that are going to be costly for you, your family, your friends, and your community? And also a special word here for parents or friends of a sluggard, because you can't enable them. You know, I've been in houses where this has happened, actually, where the mother's saying, how many times did I tell you to clean up your room? And while they're doing that, the mom is cleaning up the room. What's wrong with that picture? Is he learning anything? No. As long as she keeps doing it, he's going to keep being lazy. I remember a student I had. I've been a teacher. I was teaching English, and I had an 8th grader. His name was Osama. And Osama was one of those kids in class that never listened. He was just always fidgeting. I had moving it up right in front of my desk here sometimes just to keep a handle on him so he wouldn't disrupt the whole class. And every time we had a quiz in class or assignment in class, he got a D at best. But whenever I had an assignment to go home, he would bring it back. And it would come back in neat handwriting, and it would be A work. So who was doing Osama's homework? His mother. And so when we had our first parent-teacher conference, I confronted her. I shocked her. I said, oh, by the way, please stop doing Osama's homework. What? No, me. I said, I know Osama. He sits in my class every day. I know what his abilities are and what they're not. And every time he brings a paper in from the house, it is way above his ability. You're the one doing it. Oh, well, I just have to do it. I said, oh, really? I said, you know, you're not helping him. You may help him pass this class, but this guy's not going to be able to function in life. You're going to be doing this every grade until he graduates, and then when he goes to college, if he gets in anywhere, are you going to keep doing it? When he gets married, are you going to go to work and do his work for him? When is it going to stop? She just couldn't see that she was enabling laziness in a son. I don't know where he's at today. I think about him often because the mom didn't love him enough to show tough love and to let him suffer the consequences when they were smaller in the 8th grade instead of bigger in life after that. Now here's some verses I need your help on. We're going to look at Proverbs 6, 9, and 10. This is where in chapter 6, Solomon is telling the sluggard to go to the ant and learn a lesson. In verses 9 and 10, it says, how long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. There's that famous quote of a sluggard. Okay, just a little bit more sleep. That's all I need, okay? I'm resting up. I'm saving up my energy. I'm getting ready to charge into it, but a little bit more, okay? So here, the characteristic, and this is putting it mildly, it's more than oversleeping. It's just not getting up to carry out responsibility. It's not fulfilling the responsibilities that he has for himself or for his family or for school or work or depending on what his age is. Now, what about 20, verse 4?
The sluggard does not plow in the autumn. He will seek at harvest and have nothing.
So here we see that he is great at procrastinating things that are essential. Now, we all have a little struggle with procrastination sometimes, right? There are some jobs we just don't like to jump on top of. But if you procrastinate essential things like plowing and planting, is what he's talking about, then what's going to come up on harvest time? Weeds, rocks. That's all you're going to have. Does that sound tasty? Not to me. Okay, so you can't keep postponing something essential like that. You not only bring shame, another proverb says, but you are bringing poverty. You're bringing destruction. You're bringing suffering to yourself and those you love. So procrastination on essential things is a big characteristic in life. What about 15:19?
The way of the lazy one is like a hedge of thorns, but the path of the upright is a highway.
Wow. Now think of that. The path, or the road that the sluggard travels on, what's in it? A hedge of thorns. Now, how many sidewalks or roads do you walk down and there's a hedge right in the middle of it? You ever come to that? No. Why? How long does it take for a hedge of thorns to grow? So that shows just how idle he's been and how negligent he has been, so that now his path has its own obstacles because he's neglected previously things that should have been done. So he creates his own obstacles. Have you ever tried to walk through a thorn patch or stickers to pick blackberries that have a lot of thorns on them? It's kind of delicate to try to dance around the thorns and so forth. It's not very fun. So that's what a sluggard does. He creates more problems from his negligence. 22:13.
The sluggard says, "There's a lion outside. I'll be killed in the public square."
Okay. Now think, who's writing this? Solomon. And where did he live? Jerusalem. Now there were lions that day in the country, but I don't think there were any walking up and down the streets of Jerusalem, okay? So what is this? This is a wild excuse for not doing what I need to do. See, he's good at making excuses, and this is not even a good excuse, is it? Oh, I better not go to work today because there might be a lion out there that attacks me on the way to work. Really? So the idea is, it's somebody else's fault. Somebody didn't do this, right? I didn't get paid enough, or this or that. Always somebody else is to blame. That's a very big part of his life. 10:26.
Like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so is the lazy one
Wow.
to those who send him.
Yes. So if you're a boss and you have a sluggard working for you, if you want to see what this verse is really saying, go home tonight and drink some vinegar. Or when you come to the conferences next weekend, we have our campfire, just put your eyes over the smoke, okay? See how it feels. It's irritating. So he's causing discomfort and pain and crying for those who have a sluggard as a son, because if you're a father or mother and you send that sluggard to do something for you, it's not going to get done. You better check up on it. Or the same thing with employees that are like that. The wrong actions, it'll be delayed, or they'll lose important papers or whatever. 21 verses 25 and 26.
The desire of the sluggard kills him, for his hands refuse to labor. All day long he craves and craves, but the righteous gives and does not hold back.
So here, it's not that a sluggard doesn't dream. He wants to be like everybody else. He's got his dreams of what he wants to own, what he wants to be able to do, his leisure activities, his computer or watches or phones or whatever. He's got those dreams like everybody else, but what's the problem? He doesn't do anything to see them come true. He's not willing to work for them at all. So really, Solomon is using strong language, because at the end of it, it says, what do his desires do to him? They kill him. It's like committing suicide, really, because he's doing it to himself, because he wants those things so bad, but not bad enough to get out and do something about it. So he's trying to shock these youth to learn that if you want to see your dreams fulfilled, you have to get up and work towards them. I like what an American guy who was a Christian, who was really great on financial advice and so forth, Larry Burkett. And his son came to him when he was in high school, and he said, "Dad, I want a new Corvette by the time I get out of high school." And his dad sat him down and said, "Okay, well then, let's look it up. Here's how much it costs. Here's what the insurance is going to be. Here's what your payments are going to be." And they figured it out. So he worked those 3 or 4 years so that when he graduated, guess what he had? He had his dream because why? He worked toward it. 12:27.
A slothful man does not roast his prey, but the precious possession of a man is diligence.
Wow. Here's a hunter, and he's even a successful hunter. He gets his game, but he doesn't, I don't have enough energy to light a fire. I can't even cook it, okay? So that's lazy, where he is not willing to follow through and finish what is beneficial to him. So this is somebody whose life is full of work or projects that are left unfinished. And 26:16.
These people consider themselves smarter than 7 wise counselors.
See, the problem is, and why he doesn't want to listen to anybody, because he thinks, I'm smarter than others. I figure out how to live my life without doing any work. You have to work, okay? I don't. So why should I listen to you? So he thinks he's so smart, but he doesn't realize that he is not smart at all. He is unwilling to listen to those who can help him. In fact, he's so stupid. Look at where Solomon sends him to learn. It's not to a person, because he thinks he's smarter than them. So let's go back to those verses in chapter 6 again, and I'll read the first ones where it says, Go to the ant, O sluggard, observe her ways and be wise, which have no chief officer or ruler, prepares her food in the summer and gathers her provision in the harvest. And then he says, How long will you lie down, O sluggard? And so forth. So what he's saying is the ant has the sluggard beat. So can you imagine this young person in the royal court that Solomon is giving this lecture to that day? And he's saying, okay, you're 6 foot, you weigh what, 90 kilos? I want you to go down, and I want you to bend over, and I want you to look at an ant that's a centimeter or a centimeter and a half long. And I want you to learn something that you don't know. That's humbling, isn't it? Saying, you're so stupid, you need to bend down and you need to learn from an ant that doesn't have the ability to speak, to form words, to understand language, or to ration out things. But he has more sense than you because, number one, they work without a leader. They don't have to be told every step to make. And if you've ever been around a sluggard, you know that's what you have to do. Every step. Pick the pencil up. Okay. Now fill in your name. Okay. Now, question number 1. Okay. You just have to tell them every move to make. But Solomon's saying the ants intuitively know they need to gather when it's there so they have provision when it's not there. Also, is that idea, not only does it take the action, but it plans out in advance. It understands. So the teacher here in Solomon's court is frustrated because he's coming back to the sluggard and saying, okay, how long will you lie down? When will you wake up? So it's like he's frustrated or maybe a bit angry at this student who is just not applying himself and doesn't seem to get the picture. See, a sluggard is pretty heavy to carry because he's not pulling his weight. So you have to pull your weight and his weight. So let's look at why work is important. What are purposes that God has behind the work? Here are just a few verses. Proverbs 16:26.
The appetite of laborers works for them. Their hunger drives them on.
See, God has put a little bell inside, you know? Don't you feel this every day at certain times? You go to the refrigerator and open it up and see there's something in there. Or you say, honey, isn't it about lunch or supper time? See, why? That appetite, God gives us something that pushes us to work so that we can satisfy that appetite that we have. So work is a way that God has provided for us to meet our basic survival needs. 22:29.
Do you see a man skilled in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men.
So here it's talking about work allows us an opportunity to develop a skill that's valued by other people. So that gets us a job. And not only just a job, but it will get us recognition. So God's saying that as you develop a skill, you become more valuable to either your employer or to some other employer. And so you can advance in that field that you're in because you have that skill. Now, I know that there's a lot of advice out there that says, in fact, I think that's why we still have a lot of young people that never get out of the starting blocks. They've heard some people, even Steve Jobs said this. Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple Computer, and of course he was a guru, and he said at a graduation service in a college in California, he said, find your passion and then follow it into work. And then you'll never have to really work a day in your life. So I think we still have a lot of younger people looking for the passion. They don't know what they're passionate about, so they just kind of float around in life and haven't really found a niche. I'm more inclined to believe Cal Newport. I haven't finished reading the book, so I can't fully recommend it, but here's a guy that had some good perspective on it. And he uses even Steve Jobs' announcement saying, Steve Jobs gave that, and everybody liked that comment, but Steve Jobs didn't follow his own advice. That's not why he developed Apple, because he was so passionate about computers and technology and so forth. He was just a hippie walking around barefoot, going to Buddhist temples and not showing up for classes in college and so forth until he learned how to make some money and found out that selling computers would get the money that he needed to do what he wanted to do, and then he became passionate about it. So this guy says, become so good they can't ignore you. He says, wise skills trump passion in the quest for the work that you love. It's an interesting read for some of you to say, stop looking for your passion, because often the passion comes after you become skilled, after you become good at something. Now, 13:4.
The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied.
I like some translations. That's what it says. The sluggard, he craves and he gets nothing. That's true. He's empty on the inside. It says his soul craves. That's the real inner man, where you think, where you feel, where you make decisions. And in the sluggard, it's empty. There's not much there, okay? Because he gets nothing. He craves, but he ends up with nothing. No satisfaction on the inside. Whereas, he says, the soul, the inner man of the diligent is made fat, it says, okay? Satisfied, full of that satisfaction. So that's an inner satisfaction of just knowing that you are able to do a good job and that your job is helping other people and so forth. There's that inner satisfaction that work provides for man. And 10:4, this is actually the first proverb in the book that contrasts the lazy and the diligent. And here it says, a slack hand, or palm is a different word here, makes poverty, whereas a determined hand makes rich. So work also provides us a way to earn not only enough income to provide for yourself, but some extra, some for a rainy day, for the ability to help others who don't have as much as you do. So it's allow you as a believer to be generous with what God has provided to you through your work. Again, he's trying to shock the sluggard into seeing there's so many more benefits to being diligent than to being a sluggard. Now, here are a few more verses here. In Proverbs 21:5, it talks about the plans of the diligent lead surely to advantage, but everyone who is hasty comes surely to poverty. So here, the qualities of a strong work ethic kind of a person is that they plan and they pursue those goals, okay? So he doesn't just sit around and wait for anything to fall into his lap, so to speak. No, he plans. What is it that I need to be able to do to provide for myself and my family? And then he sets goals and diligently pursues them. Proverbs 22:29, again, that's the verse we talked about, that it gives you the chance to develop skills. So somebody with a strong work ethic is going to have skills that he can use to benefit himself and others. Now, Proverbs 31:13, this talks about the virtuous woman. Can somebody read that verse?
She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She is like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar.
That first part, the first line in there where she says she works with her hands in delight or eagerly. That's the idea. So somebody with a strong work ethic is somebody that's going to work eagerly. They're going to really want to put themselves in it. They care about the kind of job they do. They want to do it with excellence. And then Proverbs 6 and 8, this is, again, the verse about the ants, and it shows us how they take initiative. They jump in. They don't wait to be told what to do. They figure it out, and they do it so that they have provision all year long and not just when things are handy. Now, here's a hero, I think probably to many of us, although you might not know who he is. His name is Forrest Mars. Anybody got a clue? Maybe the background helps us. This guy has invented more ways than anybody I know to make chocolate delicious. I mean, chocolate is already okay, right? It's at the top of most of our lists. But Mr. Mars became president of the Mars Candy Company, and he invented Snickers, the Mars bar. Him and his dad invented the Milky Way, chewing gum, some of the Wrigley's chewing gum, and these are really my wife's favorite treat. he invented M&Ms. He went into business with a guy named Murray. So that's why it's M for Mars and M for Murray. M&Ms. Okay. He invented those, the regular M&Ms with the candy coating that says that the milk chocolate melts in your mouth, but not on your hands. And then he even made it better by putting peanuts on the inside a few years later, okay? So Mr. Mars, when he was running this company, he was very meticulous. He wanted quality workers. He wanted people with a strong work ethic. And so here's what his rule was. He told all of his sales representatives, he said, each of you have a district, and I want you to go around to each of these little neighborhood Ducans and stores, and I want you to make sure that our candy rack is stocked full and it's not messy. If it's messy, you stop and you straighten it all up and you keep it full, okay? That's what we want our name to be, different than all the other candy suppliers. And then he said, if you don't, and I find it, you're going to get in trouble. So here's what he would do. He would just show up at different neighborhood shops, mom and pop stores, and go in and he would take a look at the candy rack. And if it was kind of messed up, he would take it and he would just throw them out. He'd get on his telephone and then call up that sales representative and he'd say, you got a problem down here at the store, you better come and figure it out. So what do you think they did? They got in their car and they went straight to that store and they had to pick up all the candy that he threw out there too and arrange it and restock it. So it just took a few times like that for them to get the message. This guy was serious. He wants workers who will do the job that he's asked them to do. Now, here are just some of the rewards for doing good work. In 12:24,
The hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be put to forced labor.
so here it talks about leadership. One of the rewards of being diligent is that you're going to float to the top, wherever you are. Your boss, especially in today's world, is going to be noticing that you can be trusted. You are somebody that will work whether he's there watching you every second or not. Proverbs 12:11.
Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies have no sense.
If you work the land, and again, this was an agricultural society. That's why so many of these proverbs talk about that. It was so important for the whole country for people to do that so they would have plenty for them and for the rest of the country. Proverbs 31:31. Here again is the virtuous woman. What is her work going to bring? Give her the product of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. So when you do excellent, those works are going to stand out, and you will get praise not only from those who are around you, but you'll be developing a name for yourself that of somebody that can be trusted to do a real good job. 27, verses 23 through 27. Here's a little bit longer passage. Here's the idea. Again, this is an agricultural context. Know well the condition of your flocks and pay attention to your herds, for riches are not forever, nor does a crown endure to all generations. When the grass disappears, the new growth is seen, and the herbs of the mountains are gathered in, the lambs will be for your clothing, and the goats will bring the price of a field, and there will be goats' milk enough for your food, for the food of your household, and sustenance for your maidens. So the idea here is if you're diligent in watching over your responsibilities, that your needs are going to be provided for in a very good way. Know well the condition of your flocks. And 14:23, we've read it. It talks about that profit or the gain that the diligent will have. So these are some of the rewards that God promises. So I want to close with a couple of application thoughts. One of them is in Proverbs 18:9 that says, he also who is slack in his work is brother to him who destroys. So the thing to know from this verse is that a poor work ethic, again, not only hurts you, but it hurts others. You're the brother of a destroyer. You're going to bring destruction to those around you. You're going to be climbing uphill all of your life, trying to find and keep a job just to provide for yourself and your family. Proverbs 24:12. Can somebody read that?
If you say, see, we did not know this, does he not consider it who weighs the hearts? And does he not know it who keeps your soul? And will he not render to man according to his work?
So the idea here is that God is the one who's really watching you and the way that you work. So we need to keep that in mind. God is the ultimate one that we should be concerned about, because if we have a fear of the Lord, we know that he's watching and we know that he cares about the kind of work that we do. I like what somebody said. Every job is a self-portrait of the person who did it. Autograph your work with excellence. That's what you want your name to be stood for. And that's really what Proverbs 22:1 talks about. It says, a good name is better than gold or silver. So you're building a name for yourself by the way you do your work. What is that name? What do other people think of when they see you show up for work or for language school or for school, whatever your field of work happens to be? And it goes down even to the child. In Proverbs 20:11 it says, even a child is known by his doings, whether his work is good and pure. So this is something that needs to be passed down even to your children. And that's summed up what Paul says in Colossians 3:23, that whatever we do, we're to remember that God is watching and we should be doing it for his glory. So really, you need to remember this closing thought, that your work ethic reflects your view of God. If you're doing sloppy work, if you only work or study your Arabic or study your studies at school when the teacher's watching or when you have to, then your view of God is pretty small. So a good work ethic shows our view of who God is, and I want to again encourage parents to know that a good work ethic starts at home. It's with your children. If you're privileged enough to have a helper in your house who helps clean and take care of some of the things, please don't give them all the work to do. Your children need jobs to do. Okay, that's how they learn responsibility. That's how they learn to be faithful at something small while they're little, and that's a characteristic that you should be encouraging throughout their lifetime. I have a book. It's called Do Hard Things, especially if you have teenagers. This is the book that you ought to read with them to see. This was written by two young brothers about how they got tired of everybody looking down at their young generation thinking they don't do anything. So they tackled some hard things, and this book encourages those who read it on some of the hard things that they can look at. See, we need to encourage one another to have a good work ethic, to give every job our best. I was at a very busy point in my life about 15 years ago. I was a professor. I taught several classes. I was a chairman of a department. I was the academic dean. I was working on 2 doctorates, a PhD and a doctorate of ministry. I had 4 children. I had a wife. I was helping in churches. I was doing all kinds of things, but I was bogged down. So my wife, she wanted to help encourage me to get out of this. She gave me this little card, and so I put it on my computer. Here's what it says. It says, some people dream of success while others wake up and work hard at it. That's what I needed. That's what spurred me to finish both doctorates in the same year and to be able to finish the responsibilities that I had. And that still pushed me on. So encourage one another to be good workers. Father, thank you that your word is so practical. It helps us even to know how we do our simple tasks, whether around the house or at school or at a job or learning a language. Thank you for the grace that you give us to do our work well. And thank you, too, for the encouragement and motivation you give us to do it well. And help us to honor and please you with the way that we do. May we sign everything that we do with excellence. In Jesus' name, amen.